In the Borussia Dortmund PSG game the other night and the Brighton Liverpool game a few weeks back, I noticed something about how Adeyemi and Lamptey were used as wide midfielders that got me thinking about how Jeremie Frimpong could potentially be used in an unusual role for Manchester United. We can see here as PSG progress the ball down their right side that initially Adeyemi is holding a fairly regular defensive position for a wide midfielder in a 5-4-1 defensive shape. But his movement when Ousmane Dembele receives the ball on the right flank is something that most people won't even second glance at. But before I come on to the examples of how Lamptey and Adeyemi were used very effectively from a defensive point of view, how good is Jeremie Frimpong, what does his FB ref report tell us about him, and does he have to be used as a right wing back or could he be used somewhere else? So for me, Jeremie Frimpong is the best right wing back in the world at the moment. In that wing back position, I'd probably even have him ahead of Hakimi. However, if you've watched Leverkusen this season, you'll see that in a lot of phases of play, Frimpong actually plays more like a right winger than a right wing back. Defensively, while Xabi Alonso does utilise a 5-2-3-1 narrow defensive shape, often we see Leverkusen use more of a 4 at the back out of possession, with Alejandro Grimaldo playing more as an orthodox left back in a back 4, with Kosunu, the right-sided centre back in the back 3, coming across and filling the right back position, as Frimpong sits in the midfield line as a right-sided midfielder. And when I come on to what Adeyemi and Lamptey were asked to do out of possession in a similar role, you'll see how Frimpong could be used incredibly effectively even if United weren't to use a 5 at the back system. But of course it's in possession where Frimpong's biggest qualities lay, and we can see this from his FB ref report. But before I come on to that, if you like me are excited about the upcoming Euros, then go over to Jersey FIFA and check out all their international jerseys from Euro 2024, as well as their retro jerseys from club and international sides, and Manchester United as well. If you use code Atlantis at checkout, you'll get a discount. A link will be in my Instagram bio, which I will leave linked in the description. So if we look at Frimpong's FB ref report from the past 365 days, when compared against every other fullback in Europe's top 5 leagues, we can see that when it comes to non-penalty goals, non-penalty XG, XG assisted as well as his progressive carries and his successful take-ons, that Frimpong is head and shoulders above almost every other fullback in world football, ranking in the mid to high 90th percentiles for all of those metrics. His acceleration and pace combined with his dribbling ability makes him a multifaceted threat down the flank, capable of receiving the ball to feet and either driving the ball forward if there is space ahead of him, isolating the fullback in a 1v1 and then beating them down the outside, or exchanging a 1-2 or a pass inside before then making a third man bursting run down the outside of the fullback, looking to get into a crossing position in the final third, wherefrom he specialises in these low crosses that are almost passes, either across the box or cut back to the edge. But really, anyone who watches Frimpong play can see this, so I'm not really telling you anything you don't already know. However, the way I would use Frimpong is probably a bit different to what many would think. And this is where we come on to the examples I spoke about at the start of the video, and we start here as Marquinhos is playing this pass down the line for Dembele, and watch Adeyemi's movement. If Adeyemi holds a higher position here, which many wide midfielders would have done, then this would allow PSG to play this pass into Dembele and bounce the ball into Hakimi in the half space, from where the Moroccan can probably just turn and drive forward into the final third. However, I think Edin Terzic must have instructed Adeyemi to do this, and if he did, this is fantastic tactical coaching. As soon as the pass goes up the line to Dembele, Adeyemi drops deeper instantly to cut off that passing lane into the half space, which then forces PSG backwards and keeps them in front of the Dortmund midfield line. And Adeyemi, in my opinion, is the perfect winger to be converted into a left wing back. As whilst Jadon Sancho and Mats Hummels were fantastic against PSG, it was actually Adeyemi who impressed me the most, both defensively and offensively as well. And we can see another example here as the ball gets played down the line into Hakimi, and rather than resting on his laurels and retaining a higher position, leaving Ian Maatsen to deal with the 1v1, Adeyemi, almost like a left wing back would, moves across to deal with Hakimi and defends exceptionally, sticking with the Moroccan stride for stride, not diving in and eventually getting his body across to shield the ball out of play. And in just a bit I'm going to explore the possibility of Simone Inzaghi taking over at United and potentially using Frimpong and a player like Adeyemi as wing backs from a tactical point of view. But before we get into that, let's look at another example of fantastic defensive play from a wide midfielder. this time in a different type of defensive situation. It came from Brighton's match against Liverpool and how De Zerbi used Lamptey. Here we see as Brighton have the ball and are looking to transition the attack quickly, that Lamptey is actually out of picture high and wide on the right outside of Joe Gomez, but Liverpool regain possession in the centre. But look at the position where Lamptey drops back into. First of all, his natural acceleration, just like Frimpong would, allows him to get back into position behind the ball in a matter of seconds, but here we see that he is sitting incredibly narrow alongside Balbuena and Welbeck, maybe about 5 to 10 yards narrower from where you'd usually expect a right-sided midfielder to sit out of possession. And De Zerbi used Lamptey in this defensive role in order to congest the centre of the pitch, recognising that whilst it does leave space on the outside on Liverpool's left side, because Klopp was using Joe Gomez on the left as an inverted fullback rather than an overlapping one, Liverpool only had Luis Diaz in that wide position on the left, and so Lamptey's extreme narrow position works to congest the centre of the pitch, with Brighton dropping into a very narrow 4-2-3-1 shape out of possession, without leaving Brighton's right back isolated in a 2v1 on the flank. And Frimpong could be used in a similar role to how both Adeyemi and Lamptey were used in these examples. So let's say that United are defending in a 4-4-2 shape. I've added Todibo, Bastoni and Onana just to fill the spaces, but Frimpong is being used as a right-sided midfielder with Dalot behind. If United come up against a side like Manchester City or Arsenal, who don't use an overlapping left-back, but instead a left-back that's going to hold a deeper position in possession, like Josko Guardiola or Kiwior, when the ball does get circulated to the far side, United's left, rather than having to worry about the fullback on his outside and drop him back into a wider position on the outside of Dalot to track the overlapping run, Frimpong can instead shift in field, picking up a very narrow position, picking up one of the opposition's central players, thereby allowing United's midfield double pivot to shift further over to the left side and just give the overall defensive shape a greater horizontal compactness. And this isn't even only for defensive purposes, as it also gives United a massive advantage in the counter press and the transition. Let's say that the pass gets played out to one of the opposition's central midfielders, and either Mainu or Onana are able to win possession. Now, because Frimpong is situated in a central position, a lot narrower than the fullback or centre-back on his outside, who in possession will likely be holding a slightly wider position than Frimpong, and so this means that when United regain possession, Frimpong has the position and the pace to burst into the space between the opposition's back free in possession, and if the ball can get into Bruno Fernandes in this high position, because Frimpong is starting his run from the inside of the opposition's fullback rather than the outside, now he has a greater advantage than if he was to make that run from the outside of the fullback. And because when he's making this bursting run in behind, he's released in behind the back line, rather than receiving the ball in a wider position on the outside of the box, his narrower defensive position means that he can now make a run and receive it inside the width of the box, giving him more options for a pass, cross, or running through himself into a 1v1. And so Frimpong can be a threat with his pace both out wide and centrally when on the counter, but also a very good 1v1 isolationist on the right against compact defensive units. I think United lack a winger who's going to predominantly go down the outside. Coming inside is more effective from a goal scoring point of view, but if you have a player like Doku, Matoma or Frimpong, then either on their own or with the assistance of a pass down the line, they are able to progress the ball into a direct chance creating position, either from a low cross across the box or a ball cut back to the edge of the box.